property, housing,
skills,
this is revolution, Stokvel for every rural, blockchain,
crypto, women, wealth and well-being.
podcast. This is heaven, revolution, podcast. We are coming for everything.
Greetings everyone, Molweni, Dumelang, Sanibonani. Welcome to the Stokvel Revolution podcast, another episode where we get to educate each other about Stokvels. Today I have my favorite person in banking where Stokvels are concerned, and I am going to ask her all the questions that I usually get from Stokvels when it comes to banking. I have Faith Mneno, Head of Emerging Markets from Standard Bank for Consumer and High Net Worth Individuals. Faith, thank you so much for honoring our invite and welcome to the Stokvel Revolution podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Greetings to you and to your listeners at home. Thanks for having me.
So there's been so much that has been said about banking, but before we get into it, we've got a theme question here on the show where we want your personal experience or your Stokvel story that you can remember, whether it's growing up or whatever Stokvel story you have.
So that's actually an interesting one to start with. I personally don't have one, but I come from an environment where Stokvels are very prevalent in how people save, and how people even borrow each other money. When you don't have money, you go borrow from the Stokvel. Yeah. So I think my background is just growing up in that environment. My father was a businessman. Even in such contexts, it was the support from the community and the people around him, that enabled him to achieve what he did. So I think for me, I'm an observer of the benefits of Stokvels, and I really can tell that it's something that's beneficial for society.
Very well. Something interesting you said there in terms of helping community. That is such a core principle about Stokvels. Before even money even was a big thing into Stokvels, it was all about helping each other within the community. I always say my first experience of Stokvels was of Millie Mill and Candle, because that's how my mother's neighbors, we used to, when somebody passes away, we used to take the candle and Millie Mill, not necessarily money. So definitely about community and helping us. But getting into banking on Stokvels, Stokvels are big on banking now, and we know it's one of the most active customers to banks. I just want to ask to tell us about your background in terms of banking, especially banking this specific market.
All right. So I'm a strategist. So my role predominantly is to say what strategies do we adopt as a bank to service the different markets. And I think in the past couple of years, the banking sector or the customer segment that I've been looking after is one where Stokvels are prevalent. This is the customers who are on the lower end of the income range. So I've been strategizing around how do we bank these people. How do we embed ourselves in how they do finances? And I think as I was doing the strategy around that segment, I realized that Stokvels are a significant pillar to how those communities run their finances, how they save in Stokvels, how they borrow in Stokvels, and how money moves around their hands. It's generally through Stokvels. So some Stokvels, remember, are not saving to a certain time. They're just exchanging money from month to month. So I think for me as a strategist, that's how I got introduced to Stokvels, because it's prevalent in a segment that I'm strategizing concerning. So due to that, I've had to do a lot of interactions with Stokvels. And one of the big mistakes that we do in these corporate corridors is that we always want to solve based on our perspective. But I've learned, and one of my methodologies that I've adopted is to make sure that I must solve not from my perspective, I must strategize from their perspective. So I guess that meant I needed to spend a lot of time. Just attend the Stokvel meeting. You don't have any specific questions to ask. You are just observing and immersing yourself. I always tell my colleagues that it's one thing to read something in a PowerPoint, but it's another to literally be there and experience. I think for me, my background is that as a strategist, I've had to be involved in Stokvels because I needed to solve for that market.
That's very, very interesting. It's something definitely from the corporate sector that really has been a challenge. People understanding their understanding really from there. So it's a very interesting methodology that you are really applying there. I'm excited to see more of
what comes out of that.
So there, I get a lot of this question, and I still don't understand the banking sector as a whole. Why we're still here? We're getting charged a lot just from a perspective of Stokvels, that they always complaining about either bank charges, very low interest, and you won't even believe debit orders and not having internet banking in this day and age.
Sure.
What do you think is the challenge from the banking sector in order to serve these basics to the Stokvel market?
That's an important question. So Stokvels are a different construct to what traditional banks are used to. So, for example, we solve for individuals, or we solve for corporate or formalized groups. But a Stokvel is somewhere in between. It's not really a group that has got a constitution. Well, some do a constitution, it's not registered on CIPC. It's a certain construct that sits somewhere in between individuals and formal organizations. And I think for that reasons, we've got a tendency of applying existing methodologies to this different construct. And I think that is why we apply solutions that are not curated for the Stokvel. And I guess that's what the challenge of that's the question I've been putting forward, to say, how are we able to step back from the traditional way of doing banking and build propositions that are curated specifically to this kind of customer? Because in that case, then you'll start to find out what is their key need, what is their key concern, what are they trying to do? Surely they're not saving just to save. There's a certain goal and a certain purpose. And if we as banks are unable to align ourselves to this new construct, neither individual nor formalized business, somewhere in between, if we're unable to adjust how we do things, we're constantly going to miss it.
So you would say they almost need a new product specifically for them.
Absolutely. A curated one that is specific to their needs and their aspirations.
Talking about curating and this specifically, what do you think, especially banks like Standard Bank, how can they talk the Stokvel language, at least as a start, in order to understand this market?
One word: immersion. We have to immerse ourselves in that world so that we start understanding that world. Before I speak to that market, I need to learn that market. Before I try and communicate anything to that market, I need to understand what's important to that market so that I align my offerings and my positionings to them. So I think the first key thing I'm going to beg, not even just banks, this generally, solution makers across the different industries, that you have to immerse yourself in the industries that you are solving for, so that you're not solving from your perspective. You must solve from their perspective, and that needs a lot of immersion.
It's a good language. So you are reminding me when I started in this journey of working with Stokvels, especially because I was from a banking sector, and I always found myself in the middle, trying to communicate what Stokvels are trying to say to the banks and trying to communicate what the banks are trying to sell to the Stokvel.
Yeah.
So I like the emerging of it, because it means you need to go practically feel it and really hear what are the pains of this of these groups. And as long as we don't understand the unique, as a banking sector, the unique needs of this market, we'll never get to a point where we are actually partnering, where it's supposed to be a Stokvel should be able to walk into a bank like an individual would be able to and really get that.
There's one thing I always talk about that says, normally what we do when we're trying to understand a certain market, we get researchers, and the researchers, we send the researchers to go. And the researchers go and they engage and they get these interesting insights and they put them in a nice PowerPoint presentation and they bring back to us the PowerPoint. And I've learned that there's a huge amount of value that cannot be documented in a PowerPoint. as strategists.
Especially with this market.
As strategists, yes, get your researchers to go, yes, get your field agents to go into the field, but for you to really get a true interpretation of the words that you see, you have to go to the market. So I think that's why for me the key word is immersion, not through your researchers. Yes, they can go, but there's value. There's value if you go.
So one of the things that I've heard from specifically banking again is that there are the administrative challenges in trying to bank Stokvels. What have you seen so far that makes a Stokvel such a admin-intensive type of a client when trying to bank them?
So there's a couple of things, but maybe I can mention three. So the first one is that Stokvels are predominantly in a cash economy, right? This means that we don't EFT one another. We all go and withdraw the money. In fact, even when we earn it in cash. We go get the money from our employees. They pay us our 2.5, whatever the case is. And when we come to deposit the Stokvel, we bring cash. So it's a cash economy, and I think that filters through to how Stokvels transact themselves. And I think there's a difficulty that's inferred by that. The second one is that there's a lot of manual administrative logistics that the Stokvel, there's that Stokvel book.
Yes.
There's that Stokvel book. And I think for us, and what I keep saying to my colleagues is that you don't want to flip people over to digital because you're going to shock their operating model. You want to gradually migrate to a certain place. So you don't want to say here, bend that book, let's come and do digital. It's a gradual migration. And I think that's one of the key challenges. I think first is that it's a cash economy. Two is that there's a lot of manual administration that's done. I'm not saying let's flip over to digital. I'm saying let's gradually transition. Over time, we'll get there.
I think that's a very good strategy. And also from a financial literacy point of view, what I've seen when you're trying to convert a consumer type of a Stokvel to maybe to investing or saving more, they're very unique.
They're rigid.
Community. You can't come to say, stop your groceries. Why are you not saving or investing? You are wasting money. They will check you out. They won't even hear you because remember, Stokvel people are like new things. These people have been doing this for years, and they're doing it for a purpose, and it's been working for them. But it doesn't mean it cannot be improved. How we come with improvements, we need to come from their perspective and say, you can still continue with your groceries.
But let's adjust
But
this
if
part.
you can say 10%, put it aside for saving or for investing, and then when they see that is working, then they gradually go into it more and more. So that approach really works in this market, and I've seen it with a lot of products besides financial products that because you are dealing with people that have a system that has been working for them, and you are trying to improve them in that quest. Even innovators in that quest make sure they don't lose their core thing, which is their thing in whatever you are trying to come up with it. So I think from a banking sector, that approach would really, really be great. And we've been talking about how the things that the banking sector can do in order to serve this market. I want us to look into how can the Stokvel meet the banking sector halfway. What do you think a particular Stokvel would need to do in order to have a mutual benefit with a bank?
Sure, that's a very important question. Maybe I'm going to touch on two things. I think for us to be able to partner and have meaningful partnerships with Stokvels, I think two things are quite important. And I guess in any partnership, these two things prevail. The first being commitment to purpose. Commitment to purpose. When we come together and we agree that, okay, Bandase, we're going to save every month and we're going to save, and this is how far we're going to go because this is the goal that we want to achieve. The most important thing is that all the parties in that commitment needs to stick to that purpose. Many times we find Stokvels that come in, I'm going to get in January and Feb, Stokvels come in, they want to save. you know.
They're very pumped up around that.
Pumped up, Kaloko, at that time, you know. But I think what's important, for us, it becomes very valuable when we get into any kind of relationship and partnership, when we know that we are all committed to the long haul. Not do it for 2 months and then you stop. So maybe that's the first thing that I think is important for us from Stokvels. If you said you're doing 250 per month, let's do 250. It's good for you and it's good for us as well as a business. The second part, maybe is the last one I'll mention, is that you must be open to change. Now remember, I'm balancing up what I said, this with what I said earlier. So earlier I said, if you write them down in the book, I'm not going to come back and say throw that book away. But there's opportunities to explore, right? So I think as banks, we do find interest. I mean, there's many things to explore. There's many methodologies investigated both internationally and nationally, better ways of doing things. So I think what's important is to say, yes, we are not trying to change your world, but we have seen and researched and investigated and found that sometimes there are better ways of doing things. And if we're able to hold hands together and try different things, and try different operating models, and try different methodologies, then we are able to build ourselves up for something better. So I guess the first one, commitment to purpose. The second one, openness to change.
I love those because it talks so much to what is happening in the Stokvel industry. And we have touched on, in order for these two sectors to really work together, the things that we need to understand from each other. Definitely there's a lot of a room for open for change when it comes to Stokvels themselves. And definitely accountability is already there within members, but now we are saying even banks, they need to see that you are committed to your purpose. That accountability you have with your members needs to show in your money that you are doing, in order for the relationship between banks and the Stokvel to be mutually benefit. So one of the big things that maybe people like me and you don't see much, but it's still happening a lot in Stokvels. And we touched when we say a majority of it are very cash dependent. So there's a lot of last year I was doing research in terms of if this has increased or actually decreased of unbanked Stokvels.
Sure.
What are banks like Standard Bank are doing to bank those unbanked? So what is this thing that you are, if I'm an unbanked Stokvel and I'm happy with us exchanging cash, what is your value in saying, come bank with us and this is the benefit you're going to get from that in order to decrease this cash that is happening around Stokvels?
All right, I want to answer that, but I want to take a step back. Before you bring solutions, you must understand why are they unbanked. What are the key things that are pulling them away from banking institutions? And once you've understood that, then you are fighting a battle that you understand. As opposed to not knowing why they're not banking, but just insisting that no, come and bank.
I've had so many different questions when I ask a Stokvel, why are you still not with the bank? Yes.
So I think, and us understanding that first fundamental reason for this problem is a good step to solving the problem. One, understand why they're unbanked, so that the solution you build must validate itself to the Stokvels, as opposed to you trying to convince the Stokvels. If the Stokvels see, the reason we are not banking was because of this, that, and the other, but you have already solved this, that, and the other in your solution, then there's no. They almost will want to come to you because your solution is addressing the reasons why they were unbanked. So I think for me, the first key thing is to say, understand the problem and solve around the problem, not around the outcome. Because being unbanked is an outcome of a certain problem. So if you solve the if you understand the problem and build your solutions, and I think as a strategist, the key thing is to always say, I must build against the problem, not against the outcome. Because if I'm chasing the outcome, I'm chasing my tail. But if I solve the source, I guess for unbanked Stokvels first, and I'm very excited because I'm starting to see that happening a lot across the different banks. Different banks are trying to say, what's really happening in this market and how can we really solve for that. And I think that's the right conversations to be had. So I think first is to understand the problem. 2 is to build solutions that solve for the core problems. Then you don't have to even call people to come through because they can see that your solution is solving for them and they're able to come through.
With your strategist hat aside, I'm a Stokvel now.
Okay, it's difficult to do, but let's go for it.
I'm a Stokvel now, and I'm saying, I am so unhappy with Bank X. They're taking too much bank charges. They're giving me 1% interest. I want a debit order on my account. What else do they usually complain about? There's no internet banking or star what. And I'm coming to your bank and I'm saying, I'm so frustrated. And now I'm taking out my money. As Faith, not the banker or the strategist, how would you, as you are saying, solving for a problem, now that you understand that I've got 4 core problems: bank charges, interest, internet banking, and star what I forget what it's called.
USSD.
Yes, USSD. How would you assist me as a Stokvel coming into the bank with those problems, even if it's one of them?
Okay, so there's a couple of solutions within the bank that fit different types of Stokvels and different types of investment amounts. Number 1. Number 2, there's certain transacting behaviors that charge certain expenses. Right? So the first thing would be to say, we need to get you a correct account. Second thing would be to say, we need to try and make sure that you transact in a way that avoids these fees that you're complaining about. Because it's become very important. Like I was saying, by a cash economy, cash is expensive. Right? And I know
unsafe.
Cash is expensive and unsafe. So I think for me, the first thing would be to say, let's find an account that is relevant for you, that's going to be interest earning, so that you can see your money growing. I mean, this is money that you worked hard for, so you need it to be great. Number 1. Number 2, how do we adjust your transacting rails and the rails that you use to transact, whether into the Stokvel or out of the Stokvel, so that you don't attract that number of fees. But then the last thing I'd also say is that as much as we have got a negative perception around these digital platforms, when you get to understand them, they're actually good. They're good for you. They save you time and money. So I think I would also say, maybe let's make time to sit at the branch and ask them to talk us through it, because it's important for you not to repel something you don't understand. First, understand it and get to see the value in it. And I promise you, once you've understood the value, you'll see the reason why we insist on it.
So very, very important. You said a very, very important, that is very important to Stokvels. Understand. And I feel this is both from banks and Stokvels that needs to really come to a mutual agreement of this understanding, the education behind the actual accounts that you are getting into as a Stokvel, knowing what is the minimum amount that you need to have banked in order to earn interest, knowing the other options of avoiding these many bank charges, like your EFTs, your USD solutions, and not going into the branch. But there needs initiative from a Stokvel member to go inside the bank and actually ask for explanation with these things. Education is very practical, and I always tell Stokvels these things. You will never know if you don't ask. But also what I always tell the banks, because I'm always the middleman, is that what are you doing to educate the people about these products that you are offering them, so that now if I'm a Stokvel that is really taking initiative and I get to a bank and nobody able to explain them. Or I always say to the treasurers, when you come back from a bank and to report to your members, are you telling them, guys, we're not going to get interest on this because I've got 51,000 rand because that's when interest starts, for example. But the treasurer would be like, oh, I didn't even know that. Then in my head, I want to ask whose accountability is it? is the bank giving the Stokvel member enough education about the products and the terms and the condition of the account that they are offering? But also, is the Stokvel actually taking initiative, as I said, education to understand and ask these questions? And I'm always struggling where to put accountability. What do you think about that?
I think it's somewhere. I mean, it's a tangle. Two people need to play the game, because even if one plays and the other doesn't, it doesn't balance up. So I think there is responsibility for the banks to communicate in ways that are meaningful to the Stokvel members, because that's something else as well. I could be communicating in a way that does not reach the Stokvels. So it's important that banks must communicate in ways that reach their target. At the same time, to your point, it's important that Stokvels as well be proactive to come and get. It's a game that we both need to play.
So in order to really, one of the mutual benefit when it comes to banking on Stokvels, all these benefits that we want, where we're saying as Stokvels, we don't want to be just customers that are serving, that are just going to be serviced. As banks, they also want to partner with you, but it has to be a two-way street. Whether it's education, whether it's their products, whether it's, I'm a big believer in asking for questions that if these people are going to bring solutions for Stokvels, the solutions mostly are going to have to come from the Stokvel themselves. So I urge Stokvel members that let's take initiative, like we are used to initiative because of the accountability that exists within us already. But that extra step of trying to, even if writing a suggestion at the bank, then the suggestion box. Guys, would you please do internet banking to the accounts as something to consider? That goes a long way. I've worked in the retail bank. I would never see anything from a Stokvel member in terms of suggestions. And I've seen people that actually put these things in place, actually going to take that box when they are doing their strategy sessions to say, how can we help these people? They are saying, there's this question that keeps on coming up. Imagine how big the industry is if we would have, we would be so forward with what we'd like the banks to do for us. Yes, the bank still has a lot to do in terms also meeting the Stokvel industry in that way. But point of today's banking on Stokvel is to show you that we need to meet each other halfway. Yeah. Even if we use Palesa as a middle person that understands both worlds, we do need to take initiative as a Stokvel member to engage the bank in order to serve you better.
Absolutely.
Before I ask you the last question, there's something revolutionary happening among Stokvels and that are from middle LSM to higher, them wanting to be banks themselves. So we know Stokvels are already a financial system that is already working for them, and then they haven't formalized. But there's this thing where they are saying, since banks are not even serving us the way we want to be served, how about we open our own bank? But at the same time, we don't want to compete with the banks as per se. We're just offering an alternative for mainly our members.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
That's a very interesting. I've actually heard it a couple of times, and I've had discussions with Stokvels on that. 2 points. Easier said than done.
Sure.
Easier said than done. And in such cases, you don't want to play against the other one. You want to play with the other.
Because we're talking about partnering. All the theme of all of this.
We want to play. We want to play a partnership game, as opposed to, "Hi, they don't do it. Let me do it." It's not. It's easier said than done. So I think what I'm recommending very strictly is that we are open to service the Stokvels and the communities in general through methodologies that you find best. Obviously, we'll test those. Obviously, we'll vet those. And obviously, we'll just go out, do our part in terms of it. But I'm just trying to say, partnership is always something that we are open to discuss. And obviously, there has to be benefit for us, as is the benefit for you. What I'm just cautioning against is to say, "Hi, they're not doing it. We're going to do it ourselves." Easier said than done. Rather, let's work together. I actually do believe that there's a lot of good that can come out of us when we partner as opposed to when we say they're not doing it, I will do it. Even us as the banks, when we say we can do it, and Stokvels must
Imagine they
figure
say no,
themselves out.
Stokvel.
We understand.
We have enough
So
customers.
there's a big opportunity for us to partner as opposed to us trying to figure it out individually by ourselves. I think if we try and figure it out individually by ourselves, we are taking many, many steps back. And now that we are here and I'm realizing that your operating model is not working for me as a bank, and you're also realizing that my commercialization structure is not working for you as a Stokvel, let's come together across the table and talk as opposed to walking apart and deciding to do it separately.
As long as your
It's
doors are
easier
always
said.
open.
You know me.
For
You know
all these to happen, because there's a lot of talk, just like there's a lot of talk within Stokvels themselves. We need our own bank, we need our own what we can buy
Because you ask people what does that mean, and
we can buy a mall. Yeah, there's so many things that
Easier
we
said than done.
visions, but when it comes to getting your hands dirty,
Easier
actually
said than
doing
done.
it, the red tape and everything that is there, that's when you see people only stepping back. And I was like, hey, maybe
Easier said.
if we work together rather than think. Also, when there's a system that is already working that you can all just ask what you need and
adjust
vice
that.
and
Absolutely.
vice versa, why not take full advantage of that? Yes, we are still very far in terms of alignment and banking when it comes to Stokvel, but I definitely think there is great progress, especially with bankers like you that actually want to understand from a Stokvel perspective. Before I let you go, I have one last question for you, that your personal vision for the Stokvel industry from a banking perspective, what does that look like?
Yeah. My personal vision for Stokvels from a banking industry point of view. So I imagine a time where banks are not only part of that step when you are saving money. I imagine a time where we are present in the entire value chain. As you gather money, as you save money, and as you use money. So that we don't just come in and give you a store of value, a bucket to put your money. You come in, put your money, and then we ask you, are you done? And then you say, I'm done. Then we give you your money back and you continue. For me, I envision a time where we are present in the reason for saving, not only present in the means to save. I was chatting to a couple of Stokvels a couple of weeks back, and they were saying, Faith, we are not just saving because we are saving. We're saving because there's a goal. And the question was, what's your impact and what's your meaningfulness in that goal? And that's why for me, it has to be an end-to-end relationship. We must start our relationship for how do you gather money? How do you get money? How do you spend your money so that you can save? And once you've saved, how do you spend that after? So I think for me, it's more an end-to-end partnership from the beginning of gathering money to growing the money and to spending the money.
That is amazing. I cannot wait to see that in the industry. I cannot wait to see where you have a personal or a private banker as a Stokveler.
Come on now.
That's revolutionary. Thank you very much, Faith. Thank you for the change you are bringing into the Stokvel industry. Thank you for the change you are bringing in the banking industry. You are really positively contributing to the revolution of Stokvels. Remember, Stokvelers, everything that we do discuss here, especially where money is concerned, it's not financial advice, it's financial education. So everything is to educate and for information and insight purposes. Until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Property, housing,
Skills,
this is revolution. Stokvel for every rural blockchain.
crypto, women, wealth and well-being.
Podcast. This is heaven revolution. Podcast. We are coming for everything.